Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are good. In the last class, we had started chapter number 3 of history, that is, ruling rural settlements under the company ruling the countryside. And in that, we had studied the four different types of revenue collecting systems or the policies made by the government. Okay, and in that we had studied the first one, that is the bid or the ijadari system. Today we are going to study about the remaining three policies introduced by the company for collecting the land revenue. So let's start with it. Children, I have told you earlier that the company had made four agrarian policies for collecting the land revenue from the Indian peasants. Number one is the bid system or the ijardari system, which we had already studied in the last class. Number two, the permanent settlement. Number three, the roetwari system. Number four, the mehelwari system. Today we are going to study these three types of policies which have their own merits and demerits. Okay, so we are going to start today's explanation with the permanent settlement. After the bid system, the permanent settlement was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in 1793 in Bihar and Bengal, as bid system was a failure. Now in this permanent settlements, there were no contractors, nothing was there, okay, but the farmers were made the owners of the land and they were given the status of zamindars. Now they had to give 10% to the government from the total land production. उनका जितना भी प्रोडक्शन होता था एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्शन उनके लैंड से उस प्रोडक्शन का 10% they had to give to the government. Okay, now but there was a condition. What was that? That was that if the farmers or so-called zamindars, if they get failed to fulfill these conditions, which conditions? That they had to give the 10% of their total production. If they fail to fulfill this condition, then their land was put up to auction. Their zamindari, that they were now that they will not be zamindar of a particular land. Now that land will be auction. वो किसी और को बेच दिया जाएगा. Whosoever puts up a highest bid of that land. Okay. But now this permanent settlements had some merits and demerits. Merits and demerits are the advantages and the disadvantages. Now let's see what are they. Now the merits and the demerits of the permanent settlement. Now merits. It was easier for the government to have transaction with the zamindars than with the peasants. So it was better to have the transaction of land revenue with the zamindars in spite of the peasants. Now when they had to do the transaction with the zamindars, that means zamindar had to pay directly to the government. For that, they had to increase the land production so that they can have more production. Okay. So zamindars put in more labor as it led to an increase in agricultural production and consequently in trade. Now when there will be increase in the production, then there will be surplus amount. Surplus means extra amount will be there of the agricultural production. Okay. So the trade will also increase. So there are two merits of the permanent settlements. That is easy to have transaction with the zamindars than with the peasants. Number two, zamindars put in more labor as it led to an increase in agricultural production and consequently in trade. Now the demerits. Revenue was fixed, it adversely affected the income of the company. Now, as the revenue was fixed, they cannot increase it. But with the time, the demands and the needs of the company increased. So, the burden of taxes fell on those who were not farmers. Now, the company cannot increase the amount of land revenue on the farmers. So, they increased the amount of tax to be paid by the people who were not farmers. To meet the deficit, the government had to impose extra taxes on other provinces. Deficit means जो उनकी कम जो भी उनका लॉस हो रहा था या जो कम अमाउंट था उसको फुलफिल करने के लिए the government had imposed the taxes on the other territories on which they were ruling. Okay, so the three demerits are: revenue was fixed, it adversely affected the income of the company. The burden of taxes fell on those who were not farmers. To meet the deficit, the government had to impose extra taxes on the provinces. Now the next is the Rohitwari system. This system was developed by Thomas Munro and he extended it all over South India. Now, in this system, the land revenue was not collected by the zamindars. Now, here there were no zamindars. I mean, the revenue was not collected by the zamindars, but was taken from the ryots. Who were the ryots? That are the cultivators directly. Now, settlement was directly made with the cultivators or the ryots who had been tilling the land since ages. Cultivators, the farmers who are working on the land. So, this system is also known as the Munro system. Now, again, this system had certain merits and demerits. Now, what are they? Merits and demerits of Rohitwari system. Merits. The land revenue was not collected by the zamindars but was taken from the cultivators. So here, now the zamindars were not the landowners, the cultivators were the landowners and the land revenue was collected by the cultivators only. There was no intermediary for collecting the revenue. Intermediary means there was no one in between the company and the farmers. Okay, so that was the merit. Why? Because generally a person who is in between, who plays a role of intermediary, first thinks of his own benefit. Okay, so here when the zamindars were in between the company and the peasants or the farmers, they gave the amount to the company and after that even they kept some amount for themselves also, and the very less was left for the farmers. So this was the merit advantage for the cultivators. Now the demerits: benefited the government instead of the cultivators, as the government was the direct collector of the revenue from the cultivators, so they were benefited. The peasants were overburdened with the heavy taxes. Now the company imposed heavy taxes on the peasants, on the farmers, even during the time of floods or droughts, that is the dry spell. Okay, even in that period of time, the cultivators had to pay the full amount of revenue. Government doesn't give any discount or showed any mercy on them. So to pay the full amount, even in that situation, the cultivators had to take the loan for the payments. So these are the demerits. Okay, so the merits are: the land revenue was not collected by the zamindars but was taken from cultivators. Cultivators became the landowners and there was no intermediary for collecting the revenue. And the demerits were benefited the government instead of the cultivators. The peasants were overburdened with the heavy taxes. In case of floods or dry spell, they had to pay entire amount of revenue. They often had to take loan for the payment of land revenue. Okay. The Mehelwari system. Now this system was implemented in the village directly or through the representatives of the village. The amount of land revenue was revised periodically. By this, there was no loss to government. For the government, this system was an improvement over the permanent system. Now, there was no system of zamindars or the cultivators or the farmers. The revenue was directly implemented on the village or through the representative of the village representatives who was representing a village in front of the government. Okay, and here the land revenue was not fixed, it was revised, means it was increased in a certain period of time. So here the government was in advantage, government was in no loss. For the government, this system was much better than the permanent system. Okay, children. So that's all for today. I hope it's clear to you. If not, then please do ask me. Now it's time for your homework. In your homework, you have to do question number 2 and 3 of exercise E. Question number 2. Describe the main features of the permanent settlement. How far do you agree with the view that the permanent settlement benefited the landlords more than the government? Answer is, the farmers were made owners of the land and they were given the status of the zamindars. Point number B. Zamindars put in more labor which proved very beneficial because it led to an increase in agricultural production. Now, question number 3. Describe two main features each of the Mehelwari and the Rohitwari systems. How were they different from the permanent settlement? First is Rohitwari system. In this, the land revenue was not collected by the zamindars but was taken from the ryots or the cultivators directly. Number 2, settlement was directly made with the cultivators or the ryots who had been tilling the land since ages. Next is the Mehelwari system. This system was implemented in the village directly or through the representatives of the village. The second one is the amount of land revenue was revised periodically. So children, this is your homework. Do it neatly. Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you.